The meeting of the Finance and Operations Committee will please come to order. Mr. Rogers, please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening, sir.
Tonight we have 3 agenda items. The first is a update on the vendor fair that will be occurring on January 17th of 2020. That's informational. The second is a security grant update, which is informational, and this is the security grant that was awarded and we've received the funds, not future security grants that we are in the process of applying for. And the third is policy, which will require board action.
Thank you. Please begin with your first agenda item.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe McGilvery. I'm the purchasing supervisor for the district. Tonight we'll be very briefly reviewing 2 topics, both informational. The first is to talk about our first ever vendor fair that we'll be holding in January, and the second is to give an update on the status of the school security grant that we received earlier this year. As Craig mentioned, on Friday, January 17th, 2020, in this very room, we'll be holding our first ever vendor fair. It's a luncheon from 12:30 to 2:30. We invite not only the members of the community, but our school board to attend. Marvin Lee, our controller, approached me a few weeks back about hosting this inaugural event. The thinking is that by engaging with new contractors, we can deepen the pool of talent available to us and thereby increase competition and lower overall costs. In light of all the projects in the pipeline, having additional responsible contractors bidding on those jobs will result in better pricing and performance. I enlisted the help of the Blue Book Building and Construction Network, and they are promoting the event to hundreds of their contractors through social media, flyers, and emails. This event will begin with an introduction to the school district. We will give instructions on how to become an Upper Darby vendor, move on to offer instruction on how to participate in various Pennsylvania state contracts, thereby expanding to those vendors new opportunities. We shall go into detail about our upcoming summer projects, 22 at the moment, and we will share info about our longer range construction plans for the addition at Aronimink, the new Clifton Heights Middle School, and the new elementary school at 69th Street. At the meeting, Marvin and I will be joined by our manager of facilities, Tim Leaf, as well as our assistant manager of facilities, Craig Harnachek. The hope is that this event will attract minority and female-owned businesses in addition to industry heavyweights. We will conclude with a review of our responsible contractor ARs. And this is the important part. The overwhelming theme of this event is to spread the word that the Upper Darby School District is open for business and that we encourage new vendors to join our team and help us energize our school district and community. Any questions?
I'm happy to hear that you mentioned the minority-owned and women-owned businesses. Will they be? Will our proposals and bids be have a percentage of that set aside for WBEs? I remember contracts in the past and different school districts had requirements where they maybe took 10 or 15%. So will our bids and contracts have that as a stipulation?
So our procurement department will be encouraging our local and the minority vendors to participate in our bidding process, but we will not have any set numbers in our procurement process.
I did have a question in terms of who we're using to help promote the vendor event. Do you know what methods they're using? Are they using any PPC or pay-per-click targeting, display ads, targeted social media posts, so that we're focusing in on getting the vendors that you just spoke to?
Right. So we're partnering with the Blue Book Building and Construction Network, which is a nationwide organization, has a strong presence here in this area. As far as their methods of advertising the event, they are going through the social media, both the LinkedIn's and the Facebook ads, as well as with direct emails and as I mentioned, the flyers in local schools and businesses.
I'm sorry, just a follow-up to my question. What's the reason that we don't do any set-asides for like MBEs and WBEs? Is it because we get adequate participation? I don't know if they're able to compete with like the larger or the big guys that you mentioned, that Mr. McGilvery mentioned. So I'm just wondering how we can facilitate participation for the smaller businesses and the minority businesses.
So when we previously reviewed this, one of our main pushes was we want to not only, when we looked at the responsible contractor, which we've led to an administrative regulation, we want to make sure that we're getting the most value for the best dollar for the district, especially with how many projects we're going out and trying to be cost effective in awarding those projects. We found that, or we believe that by holding a vendor fair like this and being able to try and help minority and women-owned businesses maybe become part of a CoStars or a KPN PEPM contract, it opens up a much larger variety of business to any business that's willing to do so. Because right now, they may not even know that exists. So using this vendor fair, this is step one in the process of really trying to open up the door to business, not only at Upper Darby, but all school districts. School districts utilize the state contracts very often and most times because they're vetted through the state process. And Joe has a ton of contacts through those areas, CoStar, KPMN, to be able to teach them how to become part of those areas.
I just wanted to say thank you for putting this together. I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to open up our pool of vendors that we use and maybe get some new people in. And will you be providing like a recap for the board of how many people participated in the fair? And
Absolutely. At the February committee meeting, or actually the January committee meeting, we can report back on numbers, on we can separate that by new vendors that we brought in, how many minority and women-owned businesses we met with. It's we hope to make this an annual event, and we want to start and have a nice turnout the first time. I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing from the Blue Book Company so far as responses. So I think, yes, we will share all information with the board at the subsequent committee meeting.
I have one suggestion about connecting with MBEs and WBs. Several of us board members went to a lunch event last week in media that was held by Spirit News. It's the only minority-owned media company in Delaware County. They publish a weekly newspaper, and Dr. McGarry was there, and he and I discussed that this vehicle would be a great way to reach this group we'd like to target, and so this might be our first. This would be a great opportunity for the
That
first.
sounds fantastic. Yeah,
First attempt.
be great.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board on this agenda item? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Agenda item number 2.
Okay. So moving on to our second topic tonight, I'd like to bring you up to date on the work we have done with regard to the PCCD grant, which stands for the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, that we received earlier this year. In total, we were awarded a sum of $2.2 million to be divided between interior-exterior surveillance cameras, access control at our secondary schools, and the restorative practices program known as Safer Saner. The first thing that Marvin and I did was to issue a request for information from various segments of the security industry. We felt it was critical to understand the market prior to making a sizable investment. This RFI was issued to 6 firms who gathered here at the high school in early September to take a walk through this building as well as the 2 middle schools, for them to become acquainted with our facilities. Information was received and reviewed in late September as we began to drill down on their responses. We performed our due diligence and ultimately decided to bring back 3 firms for live demonstrations. For these demonstrations, we included Lou Gentile, our Director of Public Safety, and Bob Holinsky, our Director of Technology. We were shown the capabilities of the Genentech, Lenel, and Avigilon systems. Now, we knew that since we have such a sizable investment already in our current Avigilon security cameras, any system that we considered would have to be compatible as well as scalable with those cameras. We predominantly use Avigilon cameras now and have a very positive experience with them. Any new system would have to work seamlessly with these cameras. Furthermore, any decision we make would have to take into account any recurring costs for system updates and upgrades. Genentech and Lenel, we learned, do have recurring costs where Avigilon does not. As a result of our efforts, we will be moving forward with Avigilon, a Motorola-owned company, to prepare an RFP for the access control installation. For the purchases of the cameras themselves, we will rely on several PA state contracts at our disposal, either CoStars or PEPM. The installation of the cameras and the access control systems will be performed by a third-party vendor. It is our intent, when all is said and done, that all exterior doors in all schools will be monitored by a security camera. Separately, we will partner with an architect to design reconfigurations of the main and gymnasium entrances at the high school and the main entrance at Drexel Hill Middle School to develop airlock systems similar to what we have currently in place at the Beverly Hills Middle Schools. These configurations will allow our security team to monitor, review credentials, and permit or deny access to these buildings. Finally, we will also partner with the Crisis Go team. Crisis Go is a mobile emergency app that, among several options available to us, will allow discreet communication between staff and administration in the event of emergencies. It is currently being used in various Delaware County school districts, Southeast Delco and Interborough to name two. So once we have the RFP results for the access control installation, we will share the reports with the board at the subsequent committee meeting. Camera installations will commence immediately. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll start. It sounds great. Security is very important. Obviously, that helps put all of our minds at ease. I'm just curious, Mr. Gentile, I see that he's in the room. Did he endorse all of these security enhancements? Is he on board with everything?
Yeah, we met, part of the group, Q&A question on what they can do, what they can't do, what can be integrated, what can't be integrated with the Crisis Go app, along with everything else we're doing. Complement what we originally have. I did walk with these guys around our schools. I did show them our current system, what we do now, and what they can do to improve that using these grant money, and it worked out fine. Those individuals were familiar with our system, the last group, and now they got my vote. I thought they were very good.
Sounds good. If you like it, I like it. So thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from the board on this agenda item? I think we have one more agenda item, the policies.
So next up is the policies, which require board action, and I don't know if, Neil, did you want to?
I can read the summaries of changes I have, unless you have prepared something else. Okay. So the 5 policies getting updated under Finance and Operations are Policy 705, Facilities and Workplace Safety, Policy 709, Building Security, Policy 805, Emergency Preparedness, Policy 805.1, Relations with Law Enforcement Agencies, and Policy 805.2, School Security Personnel. Policy 705, Facilities and Workplace Safety, is being clarified. Also, please note that language pertaining to fire and safety drills is being removed because it is now included in Policy 805 on emergency preparedness. Policy 709, Building Security. Policy 709 is being revised to reflect the role of the School Safety and Security Coordinator, which in this district falls under the duties of the Director of Public Safety, and responsibility of the Superintendent for designing authorized access to school buildings and facilities. The language regarding a single entry point to school buildings after the start of the school day was further clarified to recommend a controlled process for screening visitors and other authorized individuals. Policy 805, Emergency Preparedness and Response, is being substantially revised to address aspects of both emergency preparedness and response, including required emergency and security drills, school safety and security assessments, emergency planning, continuity of operations, and education and training. Most of these changes to Policy 805 are being made due to changes in the law, the Public School Code. Policy 805, Relations with Law Enforcement Agencies, received minor revisions to reflect terminology and policy references to other school safety and security policies. An optional selection on training was added to prompt coordination and invitation of law enforcement officials to attend training offered by the district that may enhance the understanding of schools and build positive relationships with students. Finally, policy 805.2, school security personnel, is a new policy that reflects the requirements of new PA Public School Code sections and revisions under Act 44 of 2018 and Act 67 of 2019. It includes definitions, roles and responsibilities for the School Safety and Security Coordinator, which is a state-defined role with certain required duties. In this district, the Director of Public Safety performs the duties of the School Safety and Security Coordinator. Included in the policy's definitions are definitions, roles, and responsibilities for the three most common forms of school security personnel utilized by school entities in Pennsylvania. Those are school police officers, school resource officers, and school security guards. Here in the Upper Darby School District, we utilize school security guards. We do not utilize school police officers or school resource officers. Therefore, we do not need language in our policy about school police officers or school resource officers, so language specific to these two roles is being removed from our policy. By approving these changes, the board is approving the removal of this language from the model policy and leaving only language pertaining to school security guards. I once again remind the board and members of the community that most of the changes in the policies on the agenda this evening are driven by changes in state law. In some cases, such as school security personnel, school entities or districts have to choose between alternate language to suit the situation in their particular school entity. This is the case in this district with the language related to school security guards. So that's the information I just read is the same information I presented at the board meeting 2 weeks ago. These policies will be up for a second reading at our board meeting in January, and if approved, will be adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Desnoyers. Any comments or questions from the board on those policies?
Regarding policy 709, with the new security grant update and the change in access to buildings from maybe the different methods to access the buildings, when can we expect 709 to be updated for those security updates? So instead of a key, we're using the I forget what the acronym was, but.
One of the things that we have to be careful of is while these are state changes in language, we won't necessarily be making changes to policy as far as our day-to-day operations of our schools related to safety and security. We don't want to tip our hand to how do we access the building necessarily with our key swipe system or anything else that we're going to implement. We might create administrative regulations and guidelines that the administration will put in place to oversee access to these buildings, but we're not necessarily going to provide that to the public or, no offense to the board and the policy on how we're going to do the day-to-day operations of keeping the schools safe in these policies. These policies are recommended changes by the law and school code, and some of which have been put into place by the governor and his adoption of certain acts and laws. But we are not going to put into place any of the points of entry that we will be establishing or our cameras or how those systems will work in this policy necessarily.
Mr. Neal, it would be a good guess that if we adopt some sort of electronic access method, the piece in this policy on keys will go away.
Maybe.
Well, not necessarily, as Dr. McGarry said, we keep it purposely vague and we write it
but
at a
if
level,
we-
so if I'm not mistaken, that we keep it vague so we're not giving away secrets about how we actually do
Yeah.
security.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure we weren't updating it every 2 months. The 805.2, which is a new policy that's being recommended regarding the school security personnel. On page 2, it references in the last paragraph, school security personnel shall carry weapons, including firearms, in performance of their duties only if and to the extent authorized by the board. I find that language concerning, even though it is authorized by the board, and I don't believe we have any such policy, and our school security personnel don't currently carry such devices, but I would hope that we shouldn't need to include that language in this policy.
The reference on page 2 of 7, Mr. Neal, the bottom of the page? School security personnel shall carry weapons, including firearms, in performance of their duties only if, and to the extent authorized by the board, including as provided in agreement with law enforcement agency for the stationing of a school resource officer in a contract with an independent contractor or third party. So this language is coming from a recommendation of the policy that we cannot have armed security until the board adopts such a policy, nor can we put a stationed resource officer that we be paying the police, the local police to have in our schools, like some school districts do, to carry a firearm here unless the board has made that policy available and granted us that permission to do so. In fact, this is actually somewhat of a safeguard saying we can't do that in this policy.
That's what I was gonna add. It's more of a safeguard saying that we explicitly have to grant permission for that to happen. Mr. Berman, you can speak to it if you want. It's from a legal standpoint.
It says, including firearms, currently, we don't have any policy that the school security personnel carry any such weapons. Not just like a baton, things of that nature.
So first, just to be clear, the way that this should be read is exactly the way that Dr. McGarry was reading it. So it isn't to mean that there is a possibility you might do this. This is actually to say, no matter what else the administration may want to do, the board is giving instructions saying, until the board authorizes it, there will be no weapons of this sort. So I'm not sure if that answers all of your question, but it certainly is the intent of this language.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Berman. Okay, I'll go to my question. Do you have anything else, Mr. Neal? Sure? All right. Okay, I just have one quick question. I guess it's really for Mr. Desnoyers. It's for 805.1. I noticed there was 3 attachments, 3 administrative regulations at the bottom of that. Are they new ARs, or are they existing ARs, or it was an incident report, mandatory notification, a discretionary notification, and a record of officer in school?
We've had different ARs in place, and the recommendation from PSBA was to collapse some of the old ARs and guidelines into these new ARs and guidelines. So we've taken upon ourselves to collapse things such as how to handle a bomb threat and to the more up-to-date ARs that are in place. So we've collapsed old ARs, and they'll be updated once this gets approved as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. McGarry. Public comment? Are there any public comments? Please come up to the microphones.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Alex Brown, address 4128 Huey Avenue, Drexel Hill. I have a question about the security grant. For the security grant, you referenced that we're doing the camera RFP and we're evaluating the high school and the 2 middle schools. Will the cameras be tied to a command center or centralized post, or it will be individual monitoring at the schools?
So at this point in time, we have a robust system at the high school. We're looking to build that out to the middle schools and then camera all the schools. And we are trying to make them IP address type cameras that we can log into also from our computers, certain access here at each computer level from certain personnel.
So if it's a command center environment where it's all centralized, that will be monitored 24/7?
We do have a centralized command center at the high school right now, but it's not built out yet to oversee all the schools. It really oversees the high school, and the 2 middle schools have command centers in their schools, and we're looking to build out those systems as we move forward.
Are the middle schools 24/7 for that monitoring, or is that?
To the extent that this is dealing with safety and security of the school, we're actually not going to make comment about very specific things of that nature.
Okay. My only concern was, one, if it's left at the school level, then the camera would be unmonitored after school hours when security leaves the building. And 2, if security is pulled away from their post, it would be an unmonitored system unless it's a centralized command. That was my comment. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Rogers, now you can do a summary. Thank you, sir.
So tonight we had 3 agenda items. The first was the vendor fair update, which was informational. Number 2 was the security grant update. also informational. And 3 was the board policies, which require board action.
Okay. All right, so we'll talk about the policies, and I'll do them individually, just so that we can see if we want to move them forward. 705, the facilities and workplace safety. Is the board okay with moving that forward?
Yes.
Okay. 709, building security.
Yes.
Okay. Emergency preparedness, 805.
Yes.
Okay. 805.1, relations with law enforcement agencies.
Yes.
Okay. School safety, school security personnel, 805.2.
Yes.
Okay. And we have one go back from the Education and Pupil Services Committee, policy 333, the professional development. Are we okay with moving that forward?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna call up the Education and Pupil Service, Christine and Ed, to get consensus on the agenda items from the Education and Pupil Services. Number 1, district improvement plans. Is the board okay with moving forward for a vote, the district improvement plans for the Title I schools? Yes? And number 2 was informational on the Keystone exams, and Mr. Brown already did the professional development, so thank you. You can adjourn the meeting. Do you want me to adjourn it, or? Do you want me to adjourn it, or you want to?
Okay. I think we're done. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. All right. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.